それではチェアを代わります。
Thank you. I invite now Ted Lazo from OECD NEA to take the floor. Ted works in the field of radiation protection, and he was deeply involved in the Fukushima dialogues. And he will speak to us about radiological protection at the service of society and lessons from the people of Fukushima. Ted, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Jean-Luc. What I want to go over is why I've been here and what I've learned on behalf of the other members of the international community, particularly the OECD Nuclear Energy Agency. And this, let's see how to do it. Here we go. This is lessons learned from you that I think I appreciate very much, and I'm going to, I'm afraid, repeat a lot of what's been said because I think it's been very clear what's come out of these 12 dialogues. But first, what I want to do is go over a little bit of what the Committee on Radiation Protection and Public Health, that for which I'm the Secretariat in Paris, how we've gotten to this point, why the NEA became involved in these processes. Then a little bit about what we've learned here, and then a summary of the major lessons that I think we've learned. In terms of stakeholder involvement, in 1992, we began work in this area. We talked about radiation protection on the threshold of the 21st century because it was things were changing. And one of the key aspects that we addressed at that point was the importance of stakeholder involvement in radiation protection decision making. So we began to become conscious of the process. However, at that point, stakeholder involvement was really viewed as explaining the decisions that were taken to the public. And we talked a little bit about values, but not in what I would call a modern sense. Can anyone define values? Anyone? Values are a type of emotional illusion common to children, idiots, and non-engineers. Can we pretend that values are real? Are we a cult now? So this is a little bit caricatural, but we started off along these lines. Stakeholder involvement fortunately evolved. From 92 to 98, we discussed optimization in the context of social and economic aspects being taken into account. How could that be done in a more broad fashion? In 1998, we started what I would call a landmark series of workshops in Willigen, Switzerland, to address the societal aspects of decision-making in complex situations. And things continued. We just had been discussing Chernobyl since the early 90s and through the early 2000s, and we continued to look at the radiological impacts of the accident. And in 2006, we published a document on stakeholders and radiation protection, lessons from Chernobyl 20 years after. So what are all these led to our work on science and values. Based on studies and experience, we undertook to better understand the elements that are considered when taking a decision. And discussion, we broke it into radiation protection science and societal values. And we established the science and values workshops in radiological protection. So what did we learn from all this? From the Willigen workshops, early on, we learned that it's important to integrate radiation protection aspects into societal decisions. Society makes the decisions, we provide them information, rather than society being integrated into radiation protection decisions the other way around. We, the RP community, are not in control. Chernobyl told us that the RP community and experts should be at the service of stakeholders. And the science and values workshops have told us that decisions are informed by science, but are really driven by social values. And I think that's all of what we've seen. So that brings us to the Fukushima experience. And in terms of international workshops, we've arranged workshops here in Japan on emergency management, on decontamination and stakeholder involvement, on thyroid cancer, and this coming fall, we're going to organize a workshop on food safety science. And we've been trying to assist the Japanese government with meetings with the ministries and reporting on the dialogues, which have been extensive. I've had the honor to be participating in all 12 of these dialogues, And what I want to talk a little bit about is the dialogue experience. The experience gained from the ICRP dialogues has been all in the context of post-accident recovery. So what I want to talk about here is not the emergency management aspects. There's been lots learned about the accident in emergency management. Here, this is recovery. And so all of what I'm going to present should be viewed in that context. So the following aspects are some key examples of what's been learned to assist the rest of the NEA member countries to be better prepared to more efficiently recover from a nuclear or radiological accident should, heaven forbid, something occur again. So, obvious lessons. I think we've discussed a lot of these. Before any accident, government should establish active stakeholder interaction presence around hazardous sites, generic criteria for starting and ending countermeasures, and after an accident, the government should use local knowledge as a key input for decisions, engage with stakeholders to rapidly allow people to choose whether or not to return home, support experts. Experts should support and address stakeholder questions, encourage stakeholders to share experience, help stakeholders to access and understand data, and establish health follow-up processes. All of this these are obvious lessons. What does this imply? Responsibility for protective actions will shift away from central government, but central government needs to support protective actions all along the line, such as individual dosimetry, whole body counting, environmental monitoring, addressing concerns from the stakeholders. Resources need to address these lessons, and it can be extremely significant, and it needs to be planned. A multi-risk integrated approach can be effective. Here in Japan, emergency management and recovery from tsunamis and from earthquakes and from other natural disasters is quite common. I think that helped preserve a lot of life in spite of the great losses during the tsunami. That sort of experience and structure needs to, I think, could effectively work with other accident sort of situations like nuclear accidents that hopefully will never happen again. Less obvious lessons. RP experts are rarely decision makers, but advise taking into account practical considerations of social and economic aspects. There are no wrong protection decisions, only personal decisions. And any individual's decision must be respected and appropriately supported. We talked just now about the compensation issues that are being very complex. Protection decisions should be well informed as best possible. Decisions regarding a return home should be taken as soon as possible. For such decisions to return home, experts' advice can put data and understanding into people's hands to help them regain control and understanding of their lives. It can help individuals support their vision of the future, whichever that is, for which understanding of RP science and circumstances is important. And cultural aspects, of course, will need to be taken into account. Some traditions are hard to imagine in other cultures. I've never seen such a device or so many children being carried. I think this is a uniquely Japanese thing, but I love it. I think it's really excellent. I don't know where the babies were going or what they were going to do with them, but I presume it was fine. Food has an important cultural aspect in Japan. It's very beautifully presented, and my son loves Japanese food. Drink has an important cultural aspect also. And I met these people in a bar by accident. They offered me a drink. What less obvious lessons imply? There is no average person or average concern. Graphs and whatnot all predict, I'll give you an average value, but what people are concerned about is their problem, not someone else, not the average. Cultural aspects play a role in decisions, in the planning and implementation of protective actions. Concerns should be addressed in the context of this culture as individually as possible. A huge effort may be needed from experts to appropriately interact with affected individuals to address their concerns. Resources for such efforts should be pre-planned, and training of experts in public interactions to facilitate effective non-confrontational exchanges would be of great use, because a lot of we, the technical community, are bad at communicating with the public. It takes a long time to be able to understand how to say things that are understandable. I'm still learning. Behavior lessons. Affected stakeholders will address their situations themselves, with or without government assistance. dose and dose rate measurements, cleanup, it's been evident that you've taken things into your own hands. Stakeholders' trust in government can strongly influence confidence in government actions. The farmers work with university volunteers, for example, to clean fruit trees, to prevent cesium uptake in rice, to do lots of things. They work with the experts that came, that they found that were not necessarily from central government. And they will inform their protection choices with whatever science is readily available, whether that science has the big picture or not. So there's lots out there. It takes a long time to sift through what's agreed by the scientific community and what's not. And you, the local stakeholders, have a lot of work to do in that regard if there's no support given. Sometimes people are traditional. Very lovely circumstances. Sometimes people are not traditional. He loved sleeping in the closet. He closed the door. It was all dark. It was very nice. What behavior lessons imply? Measurements are easy to achieve. Understanding measurements needs scientific input. Radiological context and judgment to really fit those into your lives takes time to develop. For example, cleanup should prioritize contribution to the annual dose over looking at hotspots, things along those lines. So this is not so obvious. Good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment. So it's a learning process. Lessons in trust. This has been a very important aspect of what's been talked about all through these workshops. Trust and acceptance must be earned. And for this, experts should become and remain locally connected. That's been something that's been said again and again at these discussions. Independent verification of information, measurements, and data can be an important element of trust. You see things the same way from different sides. Unaffected populations, those in Tokyo, will be concerned about food and travel from affected areas and will need to establish trust in producers and in governmental decisions. Trust is an important aspect of actions. You can see here in the background, Professor Niwa has just advised my daughter that this is very good fruit here on the table. So she's trying to decide what's the best thing to do, and she trusts Professor Niwa, which we all do. And she trusts her big brother to take her across the beach. So establishing trust, even though they fought like all the time, when my son needed to take my daughter's hand to get her across the beach safely, trust was there. What trust lessons imply? Trust is easy to lose and difficult to build. Building or maintaining trust is a long-term process. Following an accident, experts may emerge from universities, laboratories, hospitals, and government organizations. Not all experts will be experts. We need to be cautious about that, but that's been discussed. For stakeholders to build trust in government, government must have trust in stakeholders. It's a two-way street. And I think that's a very important lesson that has come very clearly out of this process from my standpoint. Setting objectives, deciding where you want to go from where you are. Achieving recovery is a step-by-step process. Radiological recovery is only part of accident recovery. It's, in general, I think, a small part. Radiological protection criteria, short and long term, are important government choices for which stakeholder input should be transparently considered and reflected. This is very difficult. We just talked about the compensation issues. It's very complex, and we've seen that again and again throughout these discussions. Nature is something that is one of the objectives to restore. It's very beautiful here in Japan, but nature can surprise you. So you have to be careful about this. This we saw in Kagoshima after a large eruption that almost destroyed a large part of the island that the volcano was on. So setting objectives is one thing, making them happen is another. You have to be ready for nature. This is in the southwestern Japan, and one has to be prepared and have contingencies. Objectives are important to set in that fashion. So what these lessons imply? Recovery is achieved when a new normal becomes normal. What I mean by that is affected individuals recognize that the situation is new, but new behaviors become natural, and no longer cause significant stress. I think this is, again, a very long-term process, but it's what's happening. Making measurements and knowing what's going on and wearing your D shuttle, that becomes normal and not a concern. Achieving this needs understanding of all the aspects of an individual's circumstances: radiological protection, economics, social, political, physical. All that's the structure, the prevailing circumstances that people are living in. Recovery is, I think, a state of mind. Once you get into the situation where you're feeling comfortable with where you are, I think that means you work more towards recovery. Achieving this state will take time and will need social and societal and technical support to be maintained along the lines. Conclusions. The RP focus of stakeholder involvement in recovery should be on long-term technical support to make sure that the concerns that you have and the needs that you have in terms of understanding data and collecting data and making things graspable in hand is something we need to support. This can be very resource intensive and needs to be understood. It can't be completely planned because each accident will be different, but it needs to be in people's minds. Trust is a necessary and central component of successful stakeholder involvement. Positive vision of the future will help an individual to choose to stay or go. So once an individual has achieved recovery, they know that leaving their home behind is the right choice, or staying in their home is the right choice. Once they're comfortable with that, it's because of a positive vision of the future that will help that happen. Individuals' decisions whether to stay or to go are all valid, and that's something that we need to recognize. This is something I saw on a t-shirt in Iwaki. Life is a gift to enjoy, not a problem to be solved. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ted, for this very interesting and impressive presentation, and thank you for sharing with us your views on lessons learned from the people of Fukushima. Is there any question from the audience? We have time, I think. I see no questions, so thank you, Ted.